part of me is like, I need to think of an official intro to my lives, right? Because it's not the glass box. Although who knows, maybe some of these will become part of the glass box. Honestly, I think this is more me experimenting rather with authentic liberation. This live is going to be different. And I know that it wasn't the last live I did. It was the one I think on January 10th, maybe. It was the one that I read the prologue to my sister's book, We Are Animals. She has 2 books. I would recommend both. We'll dive into more on that later. This is going to be an interesting live, though, for a few reasons. One, there's something that I've wanted to talk about for a while, but there's been things holding me back, right? And also, I'm on the precipice of some pretty big change, so why not just do it, right? First, right? Today is Friday, January 23rd, 2026. When I started going live on Substack, and I've only been live a handful of times, so it's not like I have a great track record yet. I made a comment about how I was going to go live on Wednesdays no matter what, and that there would be different days of the week where if I felt called to go live, I would. But Wednesdays were like my dedicated, you have to go live day. But then I put that caveat in there, like, unless something happens, right? Like maybe I don't have the energy, or maybe work things happen and I just can't go live, right? There's a part of me that's like, Emily, were you setting yourself up to get out of things? Mo. This is Mo. I'm pretty sure I've shown him before. Hi, Blowy Boy. I don't know what number he was. I probably was not. I didn't need him, right? But at the same time, he's the cat that kind of like. He's the one that started first interacting with the dogs. So he's an integral part of the sanctuary. But anyway, get back on track, right? I had made a comment about, and like an intention with myself more than anything, that I would go live on Wednesdays. And I didn't go live this Wednesday. It was the first Wednesday that I didn't go live. Granted, it was only only the 4th Wednesday in a row, right? I've shared, well, I haven't published the replays for every live yet. I will at some point. I'm figuring things out, like in terms of how I want this to go. Call it an experiment, right? Which part of me doesn't like, because the perfectionist in me is like, no. I want this to be perfect. I want it to be like, I have the vision. I know exactly what I see for this in the future, but I'm not there yet. So there's a part of me that's very frustrated, right? Anyway, I digress. Zora, no. We don't need to lick that. Zora's got like a little irritation on her, so I'm like trying to prevent her from licking that more. But anyway, I didn't go live this Wednesday for a few reasons. One, I was exhausted, and I'm exhausted now. Um, but the reason why I'm going live now is because I have a lot of things to say. And also, I'm like, there's part of me that's like, Emily, you should just wait until later today, take a nap, and then go live. But I'm like, if I take a nap right now, I'm not gonna want to go live later. I'm gonna want to take a bath and then get in my comfy clothes. Granted, I'm in my comfy clothes, but like, I'm not gonna want to socialize at all. And I consider this socializing, right? Like, I am showing up in some capacity to be witnessed. So, this live is gonna be a little bit different. One, I know there's a voice in the back of my mind, right? That's like, Emily, you don't need to prepare people. You don't need to present all of these disclaimers for why they should stay tuned and keep watching. And I know that. But there's a part of me that wants to. And this is where I feel like this live is going to be different than the previous ones, because I would not be surprised if I start crying. So, right. I had a conversation with a friend earlier today. I don't have a whole lot of people in my life that I can soundboard openly off of and like completely vulnerable. Like, there aren't a lot of places where I feel safe enough to do that. And that has a lot to do with previous relationships, mentorships, friendships. Like, insert your kind of ship here, right? I've been wounded. Just like I'm sure you have too, right? We all have wounding. And I'm trying very hard not to bring my past into new connections. It's difficult, right? Like, I fully acknowledge that. Trust me, I've been there, right? So I was talking to this friend about something, and she made a comment about how I could be more vulnerable. And it's not that I took offense to that. One could say that I was triggered a little bit, but not in a bad way, right? What was being triggered though? My core wound. When I speak of the core wound, the vast majority of the time I'm referencing the gene keys. The gene keys in human design, they pair so well together. Like, I kind of liken these systems to like human design is the masculine structure. It is the energetic blueprint of you, your character, your avatar, right? Like, Emily, Emily Suzanne Case is a 4/6 self-projected projector. That is her character. Like, it gives me a blueprint of how my character moves, the energy, things like that. And then the gene keys is like the story. It's the underlying, the journey that you take, the shadows that you need to move through in order to reach your final destination. Like, there's a lot of analogies that I could use here, but that's not the point of this live. So, like, put a pin in it, right? We'll come back to it. But the core wound in the gene keys is affiliated with and takes from the unconscious Mars placement from human design. Okay. The core wound, when you alchemize that, like the core wound specifically is often associated with the Venus sequence. And stay tuned for that. I'm going to be teaching to the Venus sequence next month. More information will be dropping soon. But it's also part of the Pearl sequence. And when it becomes part of the Pearl sequence, it moves and transitions from being your core wound to being your vocation. My core wound is 49.4. The point 4 specifically represents a fear of rejection. So when my friend mentioned that I could be, should be, whatever, more vulnerable with my writing and my shares, right? Part of me took offense to that because I'm like, I am being vulnerable in my own way. But I also recognize that there's a part of me that still has a lot of walls up. There's a part of me, right, that's like, it's almost like the walls are made of glass. And I'm putting myself in a box to protect myself, right? Like you can look in, see, Emily's in the box. You can look at her. Like this is what she's presenting, but there's still that wall, right? Maybe a fourth wall? That's interesting, right? But anyway, even with all of the healing that I have done, I have dedicated the last 2.5 years of my life to healing myself. The stories that I have to tell, I'm going to start telling. There's still a few things that I've needed to move through, and I'm at that point of breakthrough versus breakdown. Again, bring in the gene keys, right? The pathway of breakthrough in the activation sequence runs from your conscious earth, the sphere of evolution, to your unconscious sun, the sphere of radiance. It moves through your sphere of SQ, the spiritual quotient, which is developed between the ages of 0 and 7. Mine is 55.5. I find that fascinating for a lot of reasons that I'm not necessarily going to dive into today, but would not be surprised if I weave it in. Basically, what you need to know just straight out the gate, if you're not already aware, 55 is going through an evolution, just as like a side note. But the shadow is victimization. The gift and the city are both freedom. It is the only gene key, I've said this before, but it is the only gene key that only has 2 words affiliated with it. Normally there are 3. Normally there are separate words affiliated with the shadow, the gift, and the city. So it's like you've got three different things to move through. Whereas with 55, it's like once you figure out how to get out of that victimization state, that shadow, sweetheart, you're free. A lot of times when people run into the shadow of their SQ, because of the way that it's laid out in the gene key sequence, and this is when I really wish that I had a whiteboard, but again, I'm going to be teaching to this like more formally later, so there will be diagrams at that point. But basically, right, like you hit that and you either break down and you have to go into the Venus sequence, right? You need to go into your relational trauma conditioning and you need to work through that, or you break through. You unlock your radiance, and if you break through and you go up, that core wound, it's not a shadow anymore. That's when it transitions into the vocation. It unlocks the pearl, right? Or at least the pearl sequence, and then there's a whole different thing. But anyway, point, right? Sorry, I'm tired. That's not an excuse. And honestly, like I feel like this would be winding all over the place, regardless of if I was tired, right? Because my conscious Mercury, which is my sphere of relating in the star pearl, is 56.2. The wandering storyteller, right? Which brings me to why I wanted to come on here today. There's a story that I've been hinting at for a while. And my friend today made a comment about how even though I may feel like I'm being very vulnerable, sometimes some of the things that I send out appear very superficial. And there are reasons for that, right? Like, one, I recognize part of it's to protect me, fear of rejection, right? Part of it is to protect the people that are part of the story, because all of my stories are inspired by true events, true experiences, like real life experiences that I have moved through. And even if it's not, like, and I'm reflecting on somebody else's experience, like, it's still based on truth. That's vulnerable to share. And I've been kind of dipping my toes in the waters to, like, in an effort to start sharing that, because fun fact, I've written novel length pieces before as a ghostwriter. Writing as a ghostwriter is significantly different than writing under your own name. Because as a ghost, right? Nobody knows me. I might share certain details of my life and myself, but they don't actually know me. I'm just some nameless person writing stories. But as soon as those stories are attached to my name, it's different, right? I think back to, I was talking to somebody at the end of 2024, early 2025. Somebody that I was honestly very excited about, like, was really hurt by that ghost. And it was interesting because we had been talking at one point about how I want people to connect the dots. I don't want to give everything away all at once. And why the fuck should I? Like, there's a part of me, right, that understands that, Emily, if you want to build an audience, you need to be fully transparent. You need to be vulnerable. You need to invite them in, right? But there's a part of me that's like, but I'm a projector. They need to recognize me. They need to invite me in. I need to feel as if, like, they recognize my value. And also, my Venus is in Gemini. I want to play. And I want the people in my world to play with me. Connect the dots. I'm laying the groundwork for something. Like, I know where I'm going, and I'm laying Easter eggs comes to mind. But, like, I'm handing out clues, and I want to see who is willing to put in the fucking work to play along with me, to play this game, to get to know who I am. Like there's a part of me, and I recognize, right? I recognize how this can come across. I am already doing the work for myself. Why am I supposed to be doing the work for you too, right? Like there's a part of me that's like that. And I could go into like, Emily, why do you feel such bitterness? Do you want me to write a fucking book about it? Give me a number, right? Cash a check, and maybe I will. That sassiness comes into play, right? Anyway, at one point I had been talking to this person that I had been seeing, right? And we were talking about this creative project that I was beginning to work on. It hadn't manifested physically yet. It was still just an idea, but I could see it, right? And I was talking to him about how like I see this being a game, a puzzle of sorts where like if people play along with me and especially if they join me at the beginning, it's going to be one of those things where like you can look back on it and be like everything adds up. It's going to take some time, but it's going to add up, right? So anyway, I don't know exactly where I was going with that. Part of me is like, I need coffee, but the other part's like, bitch, the reason you're probably so tired is because you're like over caffeinated. That can happen. Um, but anyway, vulnerability, right? People want to see leaders, people in the public eye. They want to see them be vulnerable. And yet, why? When the environment doesn't feel safe for them to be vulnerable, right? A leader shows up authentically, vulnerably, and they get made fun of, they get teased, they get bullied, right? They get ridiculed. They're not strong, they're weak. As if vulnerability is weakness. And I'm just like, there are so many things wrong with this. But also, like, you see how this interplay works? It's like the people want vulnerability from their leaders, and the leaders want to provide that. But whenever they do, it's like they get fucking shot down. The wounded healer comes to mind, right? Which actually kind of nicely ties into this other thing, and which was one of the reasons why I wanted to come on today. There's this story that I've been sitting on for a year and a half to 2 years. And a lot of my stories are going to be stories where the people involved, they're going to know that I'm talking about them. And I have been burned by doing that before. I had an ex who we weren't dating at the time. It was already after we'd broken up. And we hadn't even, I don't even like saying we'd broken up because we were seeing each other, but we weren't exclusive. And this is a story I will dive into more openly and with more detail at a later time. But just kind of like the general backstory, right? Like we met, was a fun time. I knew very quickly, like, that's sweet kid. I'm not even gonna say kid. I think he was like a year younger than me. Um, Sweet guy, right? Nice guy. But he was a fun time. And that's all he was going to be. He wanted to be exclusive. I said no. And we probably should have just stopped from then, right? Like lessons were learned. Um, but at one point, a few months after that, something happened. He pissed me off. He did not respect my boundaries. And I made a TikTok. I posted it. He saw it. And then he took offense to it, right? He took it personally. And I understand that. But also, there's a part of me that's like, sweetheart, you crossed my boundaries. You didn't listen. What did you expect? Also, you know who I am. I'm an artist. I'm a writer. One of the cautions, I suppose, of dating me, you might inspire something, right? I'm not necessarily going to call you out directly, but I can't help if people make connections. No one did. Like, I'm not even on here to talk about this one, but it's coming up, right? Like, no one made that connection. We have, we didn't have a strong enough history. We're even somewhere down the road. If anyone makes that connection, it's going to be because he's going to try to connect the dots himself. In which case, I will, well, fuck around and find out comes to mind, right? Anyway, one situation, right? So it's like I'm already aware that people are going to connect the dots, recognize, oh, she's talking about so and so, or she's talking about me, right? And how are they going to react? Reaction, by the way, is the shadow of Gene Key 49, which is my core wound. I'm very familiar with reaction. Not only that, though, right? I had a mentor who said that they saw me. And at the end of my time with this particular mentor, I was bitter for a variety of reasons. And I'm sure that they were too, right? That particular container was not healthy. I won't dive into that right now. That's going to be a different episode comes to mind. It's going to be different. Like there's going to be a lot coming out on that one. But the point of this now, right, is at the end of the container, I expressed myself very vulnerably. They knew that I was working on writing, that I was working on a lot of creative ventures. And they told me that they would always be there to support me. I, in a tear filled voice note sent them something saying that I didn't want them to hate me, and their response was pity. I could hear it in their tone. It was, oh, sweet girl. And that was it. This coming from somebody who doesn't like my tone. Like, oh, sweetheart. There's a part of me, right, that's like, Emily, you don't need to go into this. Because if you show up like this, they might do the same to you, right? But also, there's part of me that's like, I don't give a fuck. Like, as much as they wanted to say and they claimed that we were on equal footing, they made it very obvious throughout that container that they were the one in power and they were the one in control. And if you foster that kind of environment, sweetheart, come on now. I recognize my role and I take accountability for my part. They have not. I highly doubt that they ever will. They ended up unfollowing me when I started becoming a little bit more creative and showing my style as an artist. And when they saw something that referenced my experience with them, without naming names, guess what they did? They blocked me and then ran to a third party. A third party that we both share, right? Claiming that Emily's talking shit about us. Sweetheart, I wasn't talking shit. I was expressing myself. I didn't name names. You connected the dots. You ran to somebody else, made them connect the dots. Like, just, I will get into that more at another time, right? Point being, I know that stories that I am going to share, the ones that I've shared thus far have been like the tip of the fucking iceberg. Barely that. It's like we can barely see the iceberg in the distance. It's there, but we're not close enough yet to see just how big it is. Anyway, I know that there are going to be some people that get triggered by my stories. And there's a part of me that has been stopping myself from sharing them and expressing them for fear of those reactions, right? Particularly one. Well, there's more than one, but like the one that, again, I came on here today to talk about just a little bit. Because there's a part of me, right, that's afraid that if I share certain stories, people who are in my community are going to take offense to them and they're going to reject me. Fear of rejection, that core wound. I'm afraid that people in my circle are going to kick me out. That opportunities that have not yet been presented to me, that I haven't officially been invited into, but have been told that I will all of a sudden fall apart. Because I chose to express myself. Whether that be through my writing, whether that be through my speaking, whether that be through any any number of creative avenues that I have at my disposal. I'm terrified, but I also know that I need to do this. So, stories are going to start coming out more consistently. I can't guarantee the schedule just yet. Like in this moment, I don't know what it is yet. I'm still figuring that out. Um, I know going live at least once a week is going to be something. I have an archive, like a library of things that I could start sharing so that you receive consistent output from me weekly in various forms. I just have to I have to commit to myself, right? I've been so focused on committing to other people and their missions that I've been neglecting my own. So that's shifting, which is interesting. But circling back to one of those stories, right? A couple of years ago, I had a mentor who she said she was also a friend. And there's a part of me, right, that's like, I would love that to be true. But it doesn't feel like it is. So let's look at this from the perspective of her only being a mentor, right? Let's take friendship out of the picture here. This was when I was just beginning to really dive into the gene keys specifically. Like human design had been in my peripheral for a while by that point. Um, Human design, by the way, came into my awareness in like October 2023, I think, somewhere around that time. It might have been September. It was right around the time that I went to Hawaii, which I will be sharing that story soon-ish, right? I need to write it. I've got a lot of pictures. Like I need to get organized with it, but it's coming. Um, and then that spring, I went to Mexico, and that was when the gene keys kind of like unlocked the next level for me. So I came back from this trip, right? And I was fascinated by the core wound. Like the way I resonated with the core wound so much. And that's out of everything with the gene keys, that is the thing that I come back to the most. But I touch on everything, right? I just see how everything comes back to the core wound. But anyway, I digress. I was starting to dive into things, and there's 2 points I want to make here, right? One, I was fascinated by the Venus sequence, right? Because the Venus sequence is like affiliated with love and relationships. That's kind of how it's marketed. But as a single person who has not been in a committed relationship for over a decade at this point, like my last relationship ended in 2015. So, just as like a heads up, I am happy to listen to your stories about relationships and make the connections between like, well, maybe you could look at this sphere, right? Or this aspect of your chart. But if you're somebody who's looking for like legit relationship advice, like how do I get into a long-term committed relationship? How do I do the X, Y, or Z in my marriage? I don't fucking know. Let me refer you to somebody though, right? Like I'm more of you're an independent person who wants to stop being taken advantage of and like all that jazz, you come to me, right? Like different strokes for different folks comes to mind. But anyway, also this friend that I started this live with, who was like, Emily, you need to be a little bit more vulnerable. Um, what did she say? It's like flown the coop. Um, fuck. I don't remember. Oh yeah. Um, she rightfully so made the comment, you don't need to be everything to everybody. But part of me, right, has been conditioned to be everything to everybody, which is probably one of the reasons why I'm so freaking exhausted. Like, oh, so thank you for that wisdom. You know who you are. Um, but yeah, I'm fascinated by all things relationships because stories, right? And like the psychology of it and just I'm fascinated. But also I recognize like I don't have the experience in relationships to back that up. So I can give my perspective on it, but if you need a gung ho relationship person, it's not me. Anyway, I digress. I'm more in it for like I don't want to say for the gossip, but like can I listen to your story and then maybe write about it, right? I would love to. I would love to listen to your relationship stories and then connect charts. Oh, that would be fun. So yeah, if like I'm just planting that seed, right? Anyway, I digress. So bringing it back to the two things, the one, the Venus sequence. I had started diving into it, and my mentor at the time was like, Emily, I don't know if you're ready to speak on that. And part of me took offense. I'm like, bitch, please, I can speak to whatever I want to speak to, and I can. But also, I hadn't moved through the Venus sequence yet. So, like, me teaching and leading to that was like kind of a joke, right? Um, for the past 2 years, though, I have been consistently working with my own Venus sequence. You can use the Venus sequence in partnership with others. You can also use it for yourself because while it is seen as the sequence of love and relationships and the gene keys, right? It's heavily affiliated with trauma and inner child work. I've mentioned it before, but the spheres, the SQ, the EQ, and the IQ in the Venus sequence are affiliated with ages 0 to 7, SQ, 7 to 15, EQ, and 15 to 21, IQ. Stages of development. So, like, I use it, for example, where if I am in relationship with somebody and I'm getting triggered, whether that's a romantic relationship, a friendship, a work relationship, family, whatever the case may be, right? Like if I'm being triggered by something, I can look at my gene keys, specifically within the Venus sequence, look at the shadows, be like, where am I? Which version of me is hurting right now? Let me show them some love, right? It's a guidebook to you. Anyway, there's that. But also, don't know how long I've been talking. Just got a couple text messages, so let me put that aside and not get distracted. I was talking to this mentor, right? And I was excited about the Gene Keys. And I'd just recently started my podcast. Wasn't exactly sure what it was going to be, how it was going to play out, the structure, the format, things like that. I was listening to like this person's advice, this person who, side note, was a generator or is a generator. I should say they're still alive. Like, it's not like they're dead and gone. Um, they were giving me very generator advice. Nothing wrong with that. But also, if they had been aware of me as a projector, I would imagine that that relationship, that ship, wouldn't have hit the fucking iceberg and sank. I'm just saying. But when I was coming up with ideas, I was pitching some things to this person, right? And I was like, what if I did a series of episodes or talks or just like something, right? Where I guide people through the Gene Keys using my own experience with it, right? So, for example, and this is literally what I was telling her, like not verbatim. I haven't gone through the archives to find where exactly I said this. But I gave an example of what if I started with my conscious sun. Your conscious sun in human design is the sphere or becomes the sphere of your life's work in the Gene Keys. It's part of the activation sequence. It is also your brand in the Pearl and the Star Pearl sequence. Okay? So it plays multiple roles, which makes sense, right? Because your conscious sun is like 70% of your energy. It's a significant aspect to who you are. So I made this comment, right? About what if I did a series going through the Gene Keys and I did it in a way that allows me to speak to my experiences with it moving through my own Gene Keys. Meaning I would be sharing personal, vulnerable stories of myself moving through my trauma, showing my healing journey to whomever wants to tune in and listen. This was almost 2 years ago, okay? Their response to that was nobody wants to hear about you. They want you to talk about them. And on one hand, I understand why they said that, right? Because from a sales perspective, right? You want to draw people in by talking about them, by telling people this is who you are, right? You need this. This is the thing that is going to get you from point A to point B. This is you. It's a sales tactic. I get that. As somebody who worked in real estate for the vast majority of my tenure as an adult, as someone who worked as a sales coach for a national home builder, I understand sales tactics. I just don't agree with them. People don't want to hear about you. I wonder why I haven't been writing. I wonder why I haven't been sharing my writing, right? Because as a mentor told me, nobody wants to hear about me. Did I take things personally? You bet your fucking ass I did. But I'm also the type of person that's like, I had another mentor, the mentor who blocked me, who had this habit. Whenever whenever I challenged them and the things that they were saying, to tell me that it's not personal, it's business. But I'm like, my business is a personal brand. Business is personal. When your business means having food on your table, keeping a roof over your head, it's personal. Don't tell me that it's not fucking personal. How much do you want to bet they're going to think that it's personal when I start putting out writing, whether that is in the form of a book or a song or a speech or whatever, a podcast episode about them? Is it personal then, sweetheart? Oh, sweet girl, right? Two different mentors, one third party. Maybe I was the third party. That's fascinating. Anyway, there's a part of me right now, right? That's like, Emily, you're still scratching the surface. You're not being vulnerable enough. But there's also the part of me that's like, how vulnerable do you want me to be? Like, do you want to see me moving through the emotions in the moment, crying, things like that? I'm sure you will at some point. It may not be live. It may be me sharing videos of me processing things from before. I have, like I've said, I've got an archive. To me sharing this, me speaking to this is vulnerable. I may not be showing all of the emotions in the moment, but sweetheart, read between the lines, right? Listen to the space between, the silences, right? A lot of things happen in that void space. When I'm telling a story and I hesitate, that's me figuring out how much of my story am I ready to share yet, right? So, for example, the mentor telling me that nobody wants to hear about me. And they want me to talk about them. Unless you consent to letting me look at your charts, I can't tell you about you. And even then, I'm not you. I can tell you what I see. I can tell you the connections that I see. I can share the story that I am able to weave between the various connections in your charts, and not just between human design and the gene keys. Like, I've studied with a numerologist or two. I've studied with an astrologist. I've started dabbling into astrocartography. Like, I'm not going to list everything, but like, I weave things together. Like, people pay me for my connections. That's what they pay me for. And other things like coaching, writing, all that jazz. Um this isn't a sales pitch. But to me, if you want me to tell you who you are, you're asking me to be your authority. That goes against everything that I stand for. I am here to help empower people, to help guide people to authentic liberation. What that means is they recognize that they are the authority of their own fucking life. They don't need me. I do not want them to need me. I'm fine if you want me, right? Pay me for my services. But if you need me, that fosters codependency. We're trying to break away from that. People don't want to hear you talk about yourself. And I get that. Because in our society, we have this idea that when people talk about themselves, when they share their stories, unless you're a motivational speaker, right? You're being selfish. Look at that person, so egotistic, all about themselves. Like, or maybe, just to play devil's advocate, I'm telling you about me so that you can discern for yourself whether or not you want to follow my guidance, whether or not you trust me based on not only my experiences, but how I have been able to move through them and lead myself through them. I have a lot of negative experiences in mentorship, which has significantly hindered my efforts to promote myself as a mentor, because I do not ever want to make anyone else feel the way that I have been made to feel. But then there's a voice in the back of my mind, right? That's like, made to feel? Emily, you're playing the victim. Get out of that, right? There's a part of me that's afraid of sharing my stories, even just superficially, because what if people connect the dots? What if they realize who specifically I'm talking about? What if that has a negative impact on the opportunities and invitations that would have, could have, should have come my way, right? But then there's a part of me that's like, if you come at it from that mindset, Emily, you're moving from a place of lack, that scarcity mindset. Everything that is meant to for you will come to you, right? In divine timing and all that jazz. There are certain bridges that I have burned intentionally and with the utmost of gusto comes to mind. I don't know. There's a part of me that was probably like an arsonist in another lifetime, honestly, because I'm like, I enjoy setting fire to things. I love bonfires. Side note, eventually, this is a real side note. I will speak more to the sanctuary at another time, but maybe if I get on a roll, I'll bring it up more today. Um, I want space where there's like an actual room for a bonfire. I want to roast marshmallows, right? And have s'mores. Also, okay, s'mores with Reese's. If you have not tried it, you can thank me later. Like, so good. Anyway, there's a part of me that enjoys burning bridges. And that's typically when I finally realize that that bridge should not have been there in the first place, that there's no connection, that we do not have the same values, the same morals, the same whatever, right? A lot of that has to do with politics. For example, I worked briefly at the last real estate brokerage that I worked at back when I thought, well, maybe I've got my real estate license, like I'll do that, make some money, like X, Y, and Z. That's not my role, for one. But anyway, the last brokerage that I was with, their sales pitch was very good. Like, props to them. They know what they're doing. But as soon as I actually got into the building and saw behind the curtain, I realized, no, thank you. Like, thank you, next. Um, yeah. MAGA comes to mind. A lot of judgment, which is interesting because in some ways I look at that particular organization, I'm like, you do a damn good job of acting like you give a fuck. You have the right people in the right positions to make it seem like you're all inclusive. But I know better. Side note, dinosaurs. Tyrannosaurus Rex. Extinction. An asteroid. Chiron. Bringing it back. That's a fun little like whirlwind. Um, the mentor who said that nobody wants to hear about me, right? It was when I had mentioned my 53 specifically. There's a part of me that's like, if you break that down in a certain way, Emily, you're going to be able to make it rhyme. That's a different story. 53.4 specifically is my conscious sun, so my life's work. It is also my conscious Chiron, my wounded healer, right? Chiron is an asteroid. I have some interesting ideas about that, but that will definitely be for another time. Excuse. Um, but yeah, that's a connection that I think is really interesting. That particularly when you bring in my core wound, right? So like let's 53.3, no, 53.4, sorry. My life's work is up here, okay? Here's my core wound, so 49.4. And then somewhere off in the ether, right? Because it doesn't officially have a sphere in the gene keys yet, but I have my theories, is your conscious Chiron. Mine is 53.4. So it's like it's mirrored. And I'm like, the tie-in and the connection through that core wound is really interesting. Also, side note, I'm like, it's like a portal. Don't make it dirty. um, but also interesting. It's a portal because the city of 49 is rebirth. The gift is revolution. So, which is interesting, right? Because my Substack is called The Revolution. There are always layers to what I do. Bringing it back to the person that I had been excited about who ended up ghosting, right? Let's call him King Louis, right? Which I suppose would make me Marie Antoinette. Let them eat cake. But also, I'm like, I am with the people. Let me be clear about that. Like, the bourgeois can go fuck themselves. But anyway, I digress. There are always layers to what I say, what I do, what I write. And even if in the moment you don't know what it is and you can't connect the dots, one day you will. Anyway, I found it very fascinating that 53.4, my conscious sun, my my light, right? My brightest light is also my wounded healer archetype. The way in which I guide others, I teach others to heal is by shining as myself. And so when I had a mentor tell me that nobody wants to hear about me, that's literally like them telling me not to shine. Keep your light small and dim. Nobody wants to see it. Nobody wants to hear, right? What was interesting about that particular mentorship was one, the fact that they still follow me. And I'm not really sure, possible partnership with them and me, but I have felt abandoned in that particular ship. And a part of me is sitting here like, Emily, if you share this and they see it, you can kiss that opportunity goodbye. I have a lot of thoughts on that. And I will share more on that later. There's another part, though, that reflects back on that particular mentorship and it's like, do you remember when they were asking you if you even wanted to be a coach? Were you, were they actually asking you or were they asking themselves? Because shortly after they decided that they didn't want to be a coach. And then there's part of me like, it's like, Emily, were you such a bad girl that you ruined coaching for them? It's like, I mean, listen, I am a lot. Like, And this is good for anybody to know, right? If you're going to work with me, I'm very understanding. I'm very compassionate. I'm very empathetic, but I am not easy. Like, I'm not going to do the work for you. I will push back. I will test the boundaries. Like, look at my life's work, okay? 53. The shadow is immaturity. Emily, you're childish. Like, just sit down and focus. Just do the damn thing. Stop acting like a child, right? Like, all the things. The gift is expansion. The city is superabundance. But if you focus in on the gift, right? Expansion. If you come into my container, right? My mentorship, where I am the mentor, you are the mentee. Consider it almost like a glass box, right? We can break it down if you want to. Just grab a sledgehammer and like knock down some walls. It's like renovating a house, right? Like we can adjust things. I don't mind. Or like what comes to mind, I went to Austin, Texas in 2022, and I'm gonna butcher this name, I know it, but I want to say it's kintsugi, where it's like you take broken pottery and then you put it back together with the gold liquid, and then it creates like this really pretty piece of art, right? Like there's that. When I have my own containers that I invite other people in, my life's work is expansion. If it's too tight and we can't move, we're going to break it down. We're going to build something different so that we've got more room to expand, right? I am completely open to that, particularly because if you pair this with human design, gate 53 is in the root. My root is undefined. The connections between fun fact, having every gate in my incarnation cross and my activation sequence from the gene keys be in undefined centers for me, fascinating. Like, I don't have consistent energy in those spaces. So, how does that impact my life's work, my evolution, my radiance, my purpose? Fascinating. But anyway, right? Like, I purposefully and intentionally create containers for the people that I support. I don't call them clients. Every now and then when I do, I catch myself. It's like because I don't know how else to describe it sometimes, but like the people that I support, my containers are meant to be structured in a way that allow for your expansion and my own, right? Because I'm going to expand right along with you. It's a partnership, right? But if I enter a container, right? And this honestly, I've learned has been my problem. Like the mentorship containers that I've entered into where I'm working with someone as a mentor and I reflect back on it and I'm like, "Oh, that was not good." Most of the time, granted I could go into like the whole they weren't trauma informed, like they just I could point the finger and point out everything that they did wrong as well. Like I could go down that rabbit hole, but also their container wasn't expansive. It had every appearance of it, right? And like when I entered into it, there was a lot of room. Almost like you could look at it like a being a sponge too. Like you put me into an environment I love to learn. I'm going to soak that stuff up. But what happens when a sponge soaks up water, right? It expands. It fills out. And if there's no room in that container for me to like push up against the walls and expand out, I'm going to get bitter because that container is actually holding me back. Like, fascinating. That's a connection that like I've been aware of, but not I hadn't put it into words until I just did in that way. So it's like, note to self, I'm going to be coming back to that. But also at the end of the day, it just comes back to this: human design and the gene keys, personally speaking, has changed my life. Okay. It has given me the ability to navigate through a lot of things without feeling like I need somebody else to guide me. It's given me my power back. When I left the corporate world in 2023, I started working with mentors who had their own businesses and were doing things that I thought that I wanted to do because I didn't know how to do it, right? But it's almost like I jumped from one mentorship to another, like I was going from one toxic relationship to another and not healing from the one prior. And like if I look at things from that perspective, then obviously like it, not even starting from leaving corporate, but from before that, the toxicity in my corporate job, like that will be its own thing. Don't worry. Taylor Morrison, by the way, I'm outside of the window where I can't talk about it anymore. So I'm name dropping. Taylor Morrison, worked with them for, depending on how you look at it, 6 to 7 years. I started in the mortgage side. I think it was August 2020, no, 2016. Transitioned into sales in April of 2017. That's a fascinating story. Oh, part of me is like, Emily, now you're going to get on a roll with this thing. Okay, one thing that I will note with that, just as kind of like an Easter egg, right? And something that I will come back to is I went to Washington, D.C. with them in 2017. I have a picture of myself in the White House in front of the Oval Office. Like, and I'm pretty sure when we were there, there was a helicopter leaving, and the rumor had it that it was Trump getting in the helicopter and going off somewhere, right? A flying felon, you could call him, right? Um, anyway, I digress. Just a fun fact. But yeah, like my time there, I had fun. I learned a lot. Like, I'm not gonna look back on that entire experience and say that it was complete fucking shit. But also, was it healthy? No, not at all. Very toxic. But I will go into that at a later time. Point being, if people who are in positions of leadership, whether that's coaches, mentors, teachers, whatever, right? Like, there's a lot of fill in the blank answers you could have there. If they not only understood their own human design and how they're meant to move, one, and some people don't need this, right? They're so grounded in who they are without these tools, like you don't need it. This isn't for everybody. And if it's not for you, sweetheart, move along. You don't need to watch this or listen or consume what it is I'm creating, right? Anyway, not only will this information help you, but it will help how you interact with and guide and lead others. A lot of my mentors tried to help me as if I were a generator or a manifesting generator. And honestly, I can't even blame them. One, because that's how society conditions everyone to be, right? But also, I was raised in a family of only generators and manifesting generators. I was the only non sacral being, the only projector. And I will be going into case studies on the cases. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be fun. But if people knew that about others, I am willing to bet that the trauma that even unintentionally gets triggered or re-traumatized is not going to happen nearly as often. Because not only are you aware of the potential triggers, icebergs, whatever, burdens, baggage that people are carrying, like, they're going to be aware of it too. Like, I'm wrapping up some final assessments for I've been working on feminine leadership and embodied facilitation stuff for the past year or two, and I'm working on my final assessments to like officially be certified, right? And in reviewing that, the last section was about how you can prepare the space for the people that you are supporting, right? And part of it was suggesting you have a questionnaire, right? Which I do, that invites people to share any experiences that they've had, negative or positive, with previous mentors, previous facilitators, facilitation experiences, like, you know, so that the person guiding you is aware of that. It's beneficial for both you, the person receiving their support, and also them, the person giving the support, right? So 10TED would recommend filling that out, just saying. But let's say people aren't comfortable sharing that. What if they don't even know? Like, a lot of the trauma that I have had to move through these past couple of years have been things that I've been unaware of. It's been unconscious. I've been so dissociated from those things that, like, it wasn't until I actually started looking into it that I was like, oh, okay, let's address this, right? Sometimes people don't know. But if you have their human design, if you have their gene keys, if you understand those systems, they don't need to tell you. You're going to know. You're going to know based on what their core wound placement is, that unconscious Mars. You're going to know based on whether they've got centers defined or undefined in their chart, right? Like, part of me wants to say, trust me, like, just trust me. But I also recognize some of you aren't going to trust me based on my word alone. This ties back to what my friend said earlier, right? Emily, you need to be more vulnerable. You need to share more of your story. I would not be able to sit here sharing even this, whether you think this is me being vulnerable or not, if I did not have those tools. I started talking about this earlier, but I got sidetracked somewhere. I don't know where. About how when I left the corporate world, right, I dove into starting to work with different mentors. And after my last mentor, the one that blocked me, I stopped working with mentors. So for the past year now, officially, literally officially, I want to say January. Let me actually pull up the calendar because now I'm super freaking curious. Um, January 17th, I think, was the final day of that. I think I had requested it be the 22nd because on the 23rd I flew to Minnesota and I was hoping to have support up until that point, but they said no. It was supposed to go through the end of January, but it ended early. They claimed that I owed them money. I didn't agree with that, so I said I'm not going to pay you that. So they said, "Okay, then we're closing this early." And I'm like, "Okay." I'll dive into that more later. From my perspective, right? Like, they might respond, come out with their own story. I don't know. Unfinished business, right? Who knows? I extended an olive branch. It didn't work. And I'm sure part of that's because, like, I showed my teeth, right? I'm a little wild animal. What can I say? Um, but anyway, ever since then, I have not had an official mentor. I have taken this past year to focus on completing the training that I had committed to, um, and guiding myself, trusting the methods that I was guiding other people with, using it on myself, making sure it worked, right? It works. I promise. Anyway, I'm like, when did I start talking? I feel like it might have only been like, this doesn't actually show. Part of me feels like it's been a long while. But also, I'm like, what time did I wake up from my nap? I don't even know, because I didn't actually nap. I have a lot of stories that I need to share. I think what I'm going to do first is I'm going to wrap this one up, because I don't want to give away everything, right? And also, as I start diving into these things more, I want to be somewhat intentional in how I move. So before I just like trauma dump, right, on my experiences with certain individuals and certain things, and how that's shown up for me, how I've used different systems to move with it, like, I'm inviting you to connect the dots, but I also recognize that I need to create some clear pathways through which you can do that. The analogy that comes to mind, right, is I am very aware of the fact that what it is that I'm creating, what it is that I'm doing, has never been done before. And there's a part of me, right? There's a voice in the back of my mind that's like, Emily, come on. Like, you're not the only person to be moving through this or doing this or trying to do X, Y, or Z, right? And I know that. But no one has ever done it the way that I know that I am meant to do it, right? There's the whole thing in any community that's about creativity, right? Like when I was really heavily involved in the writing community during COVID, one of the obstacles that people came up across so often, and honestly, one of the things that I come up across very often, probably one of the reasons why I don't share a lot of my writing still, is the voice in the back of your head that says other people have talked about or written about or done these things before. What I always told people in those instances, and I tell myself, is yes, people have talked about their shitty childhoods before. They've talked about their abusive relationships. They've talked about the fact that the American government is fucking shit, right? They've talked about human design. They've talked about gene keys. They've talked about X, Y, or Z countless times. But nobody has ever done it from my perspective, from my vantage point. No one has ever done it from yours, right? So share. And like, this is me telling you as much as it is like, I'm looking myself in the eyes right now, right? Emily, do the fucking thing, right? Like, there's that. And it just, to me, in this moment, is so fascinating to connect it back to earlier, right? The mentor who said, Emily, nobody wants to hear about you. But what if they do? Right? I would argue we get the same fucking story from any news outlet being written by AI right now, right? You can Google it. What's happening in America right now? What's happening in Minnesota with ICE, right? What's happening in California? What's happening in New York? What's happening in all of these places? Greenland. Don't get me started on Greenland. Like, as somebody, okay, side note, right? The connections and similarities that I see sometimes are just like, what the fuck? Um, like, Donald Trump is a punk ass bitch. But also, like, that's from a song, just FYI. It's Donald Trump is a punk ass bitch and a literal fucking fascist. I think that's the lyrics. Don't quote me on that. Like, look it up. I'll probably link it in the show notes. But anyway, I digress. He takes on an orange hue. I take on an orange hue. Not a fan of that. Um, he comes from real estate. Technically, I come from real estate. Like, literally, my background, like, my family history is all about education, but like, I followed real estate because that seemed like where the money was. And what did I work in specifically? Development. Like, Donald Trump is literally the embodiment of taking that information, putting it into government in the most fucked up way possible. Like, but that's also what happens when you put a pedophile in the Oval Office. Like, we're not going there today. Point, right? The mentor saying, Emily, they don't want to hear about you. But I don't know. I'm just like, when I read these stories about what's happening in the world, and it's just very like facts based, right? I disassociate from that so easily. Like, I can just keep scrolling, and I'm sure that most people do, right? But when you put an individual's story to it, when you bring in that emotion, it shifts things, right? I know that I read into things a lot more than most people do, right? And that's probably part of why I haven't shared a lot of my stories, is because I'm like, I'm overreacting. I'm reading too much into things. I'm reading between the lines when I shouldn't be. But I'm like, maybe I should be. Because as a society, we've been ignoring what's between the lines, and look at where we've ended up, right? Like, part of me is like, Emily, don't make this political. But the other part's like, everything's political. Anyway, there's that. Stories that I'm working on. More reflections on mentorship, right? So I will touch more on the two specifically that I talked about today. Um, they both have multiple code names, so that's also one of the things that I need to do, is I need to like commit to specific code names, or maybe I don't. Like, I could shift things and then later on just go back and like edit them, right? Um, I will be speaking to my experiences dating. That will be fun. Um, I've talked about a few of them in little clips already. We're going back to Minnesota, as I've already done a little bit, but like more in detail, more in depth, my experiences growing up, right? And I think that's going to be really interesting, right? Because, like, to look at those experiences from the lens of not only human design, but the gene keys, right? Like, high school, the sphere of IQ being developed during that time. Mine is 45.3. What I find fascinating with that, one, okay, before we wrap this up, right? 45. Could go into so many connections with that. But the shadow is dominance. The gift is synergy. And the city is communion. Interesting connections for me there. One, the gift of synergy, right? Synergy is the third pillar of my business. So that's fun. If you look at the acronym for the pillars of my business, what does it spell out? What does the D typically represent in that typical acronym, right? Connect the dots. I invite you to do it safely and with consent. Um, Fun fact, that ties into some of my writing. I've said I've written novel length stuff before. Some of it has gotten kind of explicit. Anyway, communion is the city. And that's interesting as well because, like, I have quite a bit of religious trauma as well. I was raised Catholic. You can connect the dots. Anyway, it's a 0.3 there for me specifically. And I'm going to wrap it up after this because I'm getting tired. I need a nap and I need to maybe take a bath and, like, go to bed super early today. Anyway, I digress. Human design wise, I have a defined head and ajna. The way in which I think is consistent. Like, it is what it is. You're not going to change that. But the 0.3 in the sphere of IQ specifically represents having an open mind. So even though I think in a specific way, my mind is open to different perspectives. And what's fascinating there too, right, is like as I gain these different perspectives, I'm able to refine my way of thinking, which is fascinating because then I've got the 6124, which is what gives me that definition, right? So it's like I have to turn things over and over again in my mind to refine them. And then what do I end up with at the end? A pearl. 62, the gift of which is precision. Okay, so that's basically a demonstration of one of the ways in which I use the gene keys. Kind of just to, like, weave my own story, right? It's a way to better understand yourself. And as a projector who's fascinated by other people, right? And who hasn't often looked at herself, like, the gene keys in human design they've empowered me to do that rather than feeling like I have to rely on other people to see me and to recognize me. I feel like I've said wrapping it up here before, but I'm gonna mean it this time. I met with somebody earlier this week. Um, and they were asking me about my experience as a self-projected projector and how that being my authority, what it feels like for me. And honestly, I haven't thought on that a whole lot. I haven't spoken to it much. So, like, my answer to it felt very I didn't feel like it was as strong as it could have been, right? I'm very critical of myself. Um, but it resonated with them. I forget exactly what I said. What I wanted to say though, and bringing that in, is like what they said in response to me is a way that they've heard it is it's almost like echolocation, which then made me think dolphins. Dolphins, fun fact, are affiliated with Gene Key 27. And then me, right, bringing it back to myself, mentor in the back of my mind. Emily, nobody wants to hear about you. I don't give a fuck. It is what it is. Um, I don't have Gene Key 27, but if I did, it would connect to 50, like in human design. Like channel 27 or gate 27 would connect to gate 50. Gate 50, Gene Key 50, is my unconscious moon placement, which becomes the sphere of attraction in the Gene Keys. So that was interesting. But anyway, what they mentioned about self projection as the authority, because one of the ways in which I move through things, right, is speaking, writing as well, but it's harder for me to write. Um, there's a lot of wounding around that. That will be its own separate thing. Um, maybe I'll speak to that next time or write about it. That'll be fun. But writing is more difficult for me, first and foremost, because I compare myself to others more with that than I do with speaking, particularly because my sister is a published author and I've always compared myself to my sister and I've always found myself coming up short despite being the taller one, right? Like the part of me is like, you're taller. Okay, low battery. So wrap this up, Em. Um, Part of the thing with self-projection though is it's not just speaking. It's not just voicing it out. It's having something to reflect back on. It's like you put it out in hopes that it's reflected back to you and you get to hear it or listen to it from that different perspective, right? Even if it's just like this live, right? Let's say nobody responds to it. Nobody comments, nobody likes, nobody does anything. But I rewatch it, right? And I take note of, okay, Emily, this is what you're still moving through. This is what you're working on. Let's expand on that, bringing back the 53, right? Expansion. Like, yeah. Anyway, lots of fascinating connections. I'm gonna wrap this one up here, even though it's not like in a nice little neat bow, because my battery's low, and that rhymed. So, signing off with love, Kai. Just kidding. You know who I am.